I am Games and these are opinions. Monkey Ball is such an obviously good idea that it surely must have been thought of long before the technology existed to design it competently. Strictly speaking, it's a game about rolling a ball around until it passes through a goal, by way of controlling the stage itself. That is to say that the head of the control stick metaphorically is the map, and you move it around to subtly adjust the momentum of the ball. You could think of this as being like one of those wooden puzzle boxes where you try to guide a marble into a hole, except that while those games are limited to your own fixed perspective, this one follows the perspective of the ball itself. There's nothing else to the game. It controls entirely with a single stick, yet what the precision of these mechanics and the incredible variety of subtle differences in potential win and fail conditions with courses built around exacerbating them allow for is a game with nearly unlimited potential. Sega's amusement vision went straight for the throat, skipping all of the chaff and crafting the most intense set of challenges they could imagine to push the mechanics to the limit. Make no mistake, this is a proper old school balls hard Sega arcade game, even though it came out in 2000 and was marketed for families. We'll get into how the Gamecube port allowed that to make even a lick of sense, but even in that version, trying to beat the main game in its entirety is not the kind of thing you're gonna knock out in a couple of days, unless that's something you could also do with Dragon Force and Guitar Hero. Beginner mode is 10 minutes of satisfying fun as you develop a grasp on the controls, but unless you're particularly awful, it's unlikely to take you more than 10 to 15 minutes to complete even on a first try. You're given 15 lives between 5 continues to finish 10 levels in a row, and in the event you actually lose all of those, you can head over to practice mode and try any of the levels you've been to as many times as you like. After completion, you're forced to play a painfully long and obnoxious credit sequence, surely designed to make sure that the little kids who got this game from their parents had a chance to experience the feeling of having beaten arcade mode before running off with their tail between their legs to the party games, because not a lot of them are getting through the 30 advanced levels. I certainly couldn't after hours of attempts over several days, and I think I maybe saw level 6 of the 50 stage expert mode. I have to respect that Sega stuck to their guns on keeping the main game tight, with what I could reasonably proclaim was the most gratifying experience that a dedicated player could have possibly had with these mechanics. They even had the balls to dare little kids to at least throw themselves up against these levels for a few more hours than they might have just to unlock the mini games. I don't know how coordinated the design and marketing of this game was, but I'm struck by the audacity of the box to advertise itself as a party game with 6 different ways to play, most prominently monkey billiards, bowling, and golf, and then to individually paywall each of these behind a couple hours worth of player points, which you can only earn through single-player arcade mode. It's not insultingly cruel. Even a kid would notice that you keep the play points you make from clearing each level even when you don't beat the entire gauntlet, so it's just as worth your time to fruitlessly throw yourself at trying to get past the advanced levels as it would be to play beginner mode again. Ergo, even little kids will most likely eventually experience getting at least slightly better at the game on their way to unlocking all of the mini-games, and thus might be tempted into dedicating themselves to total mastery, while older players, enchanted by the game's unique controls and brutal escalation of challenge, might put it into their rotation just from seeing what the later levels entail. Because Monkey Ball gets completely goddamn insane if you actually master the 30 minutes of straight punishment that is expert mode on a single continue. In the original arcade game, this led to another 9 extra levels tacked onto the end of the round, ending with the Painstaking Master Stage. On the Gamecube version, if you 1cc the extra stages, there's an entire 10 tracks of Master Stages ahead of you that take the game's aesthetic to its most glorious and rewarding extreme. While we're on the subject of design, we have to address Monkey Ball's marketing. If you imagine a version of Monkey Ball that didn't have the monkeys inside the balls, it would be difficult to tell exactly which direction your ball's momentum was currently facing. While the camera doesn't usually lag too far behind your movement, part of the game's challenge is that it takes some time for the direction of your ball's momentum to shift, so you can't always just simply make a quick movement without a whole lot of room or a really solid grasp of what you're doing, because your ball will fly all over the place. The obvious solution here would be something like a magnetic compass tracking the direction of your momentum as the camera's north, and that's exactly what the monkey was created as a fun and culturally recognizable idea to represent. When you've got a puzzle game that requires the constant precise movement of entire level graphics, as well as constant tracking of ballistic momentum, it's a good idea to keep the visuals as simplistic as possible, not only so that it's all readable, but also so it runs smoothly. The most obviously marketable and inviting way to utilize simplistic visuals in the age of increasing graphical fidelity then would have been to create Sanrio-esque adorable characters that would look complete even as simplistic 3D models. Monkey Ball is a complete aesthetic package. Sega went all out and got a brand deal with Dole, pushing the game hilariously into postmodern realms as it basically becomes the world's most elaborate banana advertisement. Even the control stick was shaped like a banana on the original arcade cabinet. Its late 90s electronic OST will delight us kids who grew up with soundtracks like Bomberman Hero, Ape Escape, or Tetrasphere and could listen to soothing futuristic melodies over non-stop breakbeats all day forever. It's unfortunate that the game's constant countdown timer sound effect blares over the entire thing like a Legend of Zelda low hearts alarm, making it a hard game sometimes to be in the same room as, but when you're actually playing the game, you'll eventually have that sound hardwired into how you track your speed across stages, whose biggest challenge is often getting to the end before the timer runs out. I love how the main menu navigation operates like file indexing, so kids can easily navigate a huge number of customization options on different game modes without getting confused. It took me a long time to really start paying attention to the backgrounds of the stages, but once they start changing up on you, it's a gratifying way to track progress through an arcade run. Once I actually processed the gigantic Laputan flying castle in the background of the early stages, I started to wonder if there wasn't more of a narrative to these environments than first thought. With such a successfully realized aesthetic gimmick on their hands, Sega must have understood that even if they didn't market this game explicitly to kids and families, those audiences were going to be drawn to it, especially if it was going to be a launch title for the Gamecube, already looked at as a more child-friendly console in the public eye, alongside a game about a haunted house and one about extreme sports. When you consider that the average child would probably get about 15 to 20 minutes of playable content out of arcade mode, it poses kind of a serious problem. I was already 10 when the GameCube came out, so I was more interested in games like Super Smash Bros. Melee and Pikmin, but I remember renting Super Monkey Ball as a game that my younger brothers and I could play together, getting basically nowhere in the arcade, and spending most of our week with it on party games. Judging Super Monkey Ball's 3 party games requires a degree of context. Monkey Race, Monkey Fight, and Monkey Target are all fun and mechanically interesting and have the ability to lure you into a long trance of repeated play, which is probably why their default lengths tend to take longer than a whole arcade run, but none of them are worth revisiting today for an adult gamer with a huge catalog of better similar games at their disposal, nor a kid seeking to play something on an emulator in 2018. But if this had been sincerely one of your first GameCube games, it would have been unique and interesting enough to take you off of replaying Mario Party and Pokemon Coliseum with your little brothers and your friends for a while if they weren't all old enough to be competent at Smash. I don't think there were such a wealth of great party games on the GameCube that Monkey Ball and its sequels wouldn't have been worth returning to throughout the console's lifespan, but really if you wanted to throw a party at the time and didn't like Mario, you might have been better off owning a PS2. Monkey Race stands at a fascinating, if underdeveloped, crossroads between Mario Kart and F-Zero. It's a high-speed racer like the latter with the items of the former, but unique in that there is no brake or acceleration. You simply control the ball with the stick, as if you were literally pushing it around. The only reason that it sort of controls like a racing game is because at a certain velocity, it's not so easy to change momentum. But the ways which courses toy with the game's physics and the speed at which you can slow down for a sharp turn are a nice twist on the speed racing formula. It's interesting to note that the team who developed this game would later end up co-producing F-Zero GX, so some of the seeds of how that game came out may very well have been sown in this minigame. Monkey Fight feels like it could have been repackaged with updated graphics and a few more complex stages to be sold on Steam during the recent boom of multiplayer bumper car equivalents. You've just got a big punching glove on a spring and you try to push everyone else off the ledge. Whoever has the most points at the end wins. The physics are zany and the power-ups are satisfying, so this one can easily stay fun for at least a handful of plays. If you go up against the computers, you'll quickly realize the importance of using Smash-esque directional input to keep yourself from flying after getting hit, and that's when you can find yourself myself getting surprisingly competitive over this one. Monkey Target has the opposite aesthetic, with the game's most laid-back music and finally silencing that goddamn timer. It's just your monkey against the open sky as you rocket yourself into the air and try to time the opening and closing of your ball in such a way as to safely glide onto a target in the ocean. There's sometimes traps, as determined by an overlong Wheel of Fortune animation, which slowly breaks you to abandon your impatience and simply be soothed by the calming blues of the sky and sea. It's a lot harder than it looks to do well, but it doesn't take long to start figuring out the basic concepts of how you could be doing better, even if actually landing the big points seems nearly impossible, kind of like the main game. Perhaps because this is the most unique party game, and the only one which doesn't penalize you for failing, but simply tallies up your score at the end, I remember having spent the most time with it as a kid. Those party games kept my family occupied through a 1-week rental, but let's say you actually owned this game and continued playing. Were the mini-games actually worth the effort to unlock? If you were still planning to spend a whole lot more time with Monkey Ball and you didn't own any other games in these genres, then I could see someone getting into Monkey Billiards, Monkey Bowling, and Monkey Golf for a little while, but these are more trepidatious encounters than the party games and stripped down enough to look cheap in a world with so many simulations of these sports already existing. Monkey Golf is almost neat in that the monkey just kinda clubs itself, but you can't even hit the ball up into the air, and the courses are unimaginative, so this mode gets boring fast. Similarly, Monkey Billiards is a little too slow and simplistic to be fun, with both players being asked to take turns pocketing each of the balls in numerical order. Monkey Bowling is at least pretty much just as engaging as any other bowling sim, with a fun easing in mechanic where you can correct really bad shot timing by putting different amounts of spin on the ball, but honestly, again, you'd really have to be starved for better games to have gotten so sick of the party games that you also spent a significant amount of time with the mini games. None of that really matters anymore though. What counts is that the game was sufficiently interesting for its time, no matter how old you were and what level of engagement you had with it. Be you a 6-year-old with only a couple of games carting out Monkey Target for the 20th afternoon, or an older arcade nut on his 200th try at 1cc'ing expert. Today there's still more than enough reason to give the game another glance if you're even slightly interested. It's the only place you'll find this mechanic, and if you can master the challenge, you will have pushed your understanding of it to the absolute extreme. Even if you just want to spend a couple of afternoons with it, it's also a tremendously entertaining 2-player co-op experience. With super short breaks between each player's turns thanks to its short levels, and trading between players after both wins and losses, along with such simple, intuitive controls that the skill floor is babies and the ceiling is ultra-hardcore gamers, you won't struggle to find someone who'd be entertained by giving it a shot. There's a good handful of modes and options to shake up the experience in little ways, and you can even play certain multiplayer modes with a single controller, or trade one back and forth on a 1-player run for play points, so it's all around well suited to lengthy co-op sessions, all the better if you know someone who's nostalgic for it. Super Monkey Ball has an assload of sequels, including a direct one on the Gamecube, so we'll definitely be revisiting the series in my quest to discuss the entire console's library, but I'm giving the first game 15 out of 16 Gamecubes. While Super Monkey Ball could never be one of my personal favorites because it gets so difficult so quickly, and I'm not so deeply enamored with it as to throw myself against mastering its large number of uber hard levels, I nevertheless appreciate how it seems to offer an immensely satisfying experience to anyone who does. While on the one hand, it might have been nice to have the ability to try more stages without having to unlock them in a linear order, and it sucks to fail out of arcade mode and have to start back from the beginning when you run out of lives, frankly, with as many as the game gives you and as hard as it gets, I can't see any way you'd be able to complete the later levels if you weren't good enough to clear the ones up to that point without dying 15 times anyways. And finally, overcoming the entire course in one go has got to be a massive pump, so I honestly don't want to blame the game in any way for the fact that I'm just not good or patient enough to get a lengthier experience with it. I still had fun just replaying the first half of the advanced courses over and over again, and it's obvious that the game didn't compromise anything in giving the best possible experience to those who were going to truly adore it, so I think it would be unfair to give it anything less than stellar marks as a well-realized execution of an excellent idea. Tune into our live streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, and subscribe to hear more analytical reviews of games old and new. Remember to be the games you want to see in our goofy meme merch while you're at it. I am Games, signing out.